Some of the main failings of our medical system when it comes to the treatment of sickle cell are lack of awareness, lack of education, and insufficient training. Sickle cell is far too prevalent for medical professionals to know as little as they do about it. I once had an ER doctor ask my mom and me what sickle cell is. Eventually, he returned with this huge book and proceeded to look up the illness right in front of us. That's unacceptable. It's also not uncommon. If you have no idea what it is, how in the world can you properly and effectively treat someone with this illness? It stands to reason that you can't. Not really, not without trusting and listening to the patient, which most medical professionals prove unwilling to do when it comes to sickle cell. Then insurance, affordability, and access are all other major potholes on the road to good health care. Up until recently, it was impossible for folks with sickle cell disease to obtain life insurance. I was blessed to grow up with great medical coverage thanks to my parents. That part of my story, unfortunately, is uncommon. Knowing my own medical debt, I can really only imagine what other folks' debt must look like. Before Obamacare, I went through a period without insurance. For about a month, I had insurance through the state, and it was easily my worst experience ever trying to get healthcare. Instantly reminding me of my privileges every time I was beyond my frustration threshold and ready to just say, forget it, The main stigma is that we're all drug-seeking addicts, right? This one is overwhelmingly untrue. However, certain things like lack of treatment options make this one difficult to disprove. For instance, scientists and doctors say pain from sickle cell is worse than pain from childbirth. And the only treatment option for moderate to severe acute pain crises comes in the form of heavy narcotics, often at doses higher than most folks are used to seeing, administering, receiving, or even hearing about. Then, insert here all of the stigmas attached to the Black community here in the States. Anti-Blackness is so real, so prevalent, and so pervasive that the stigmas attached to the dominant culture's version of Blackness are inextricably linked to sickle cell disease. So much so that warriors who aren't Black often feel the ripple effects of anti-Black racism. How can these stigmas be undone? Dismantling the system that is racism, including anti-Black racism. And that is the job of those who hold on to these stigmas. That burden is not ours. So, assuming we understand anti-Blackness to mean anti-Black racism, and racism to mean the system that privileges, gives advantages and power to one group over another based on race, we can assume the list of ways in which it plays into the treatment of sickle cell is too long to list here, right? I'll say this. Many sickle cell warriors report high anxiety surrounding trips to the ER because of previous emergency room experiences. I'm talking about textbook PTSD, if we're being real. I'm not sure there's a sickle cell warrior out there who hasn't hesitated to go to the ER or delayed treatment because of terribly dehumanizing past experiences. Sometimes the physical pain is easier to deal with than the microaggressions. And this is something that comes up a lot when we're at conferences or exchanging stories with each other. So respectability politics, which ties a person's behavior or presentation to their worth or how they're treated, are at play heavy here thanks to anti-Blackness. I was at a conference recently when the discussion of attitude and communication during painful crises came up. Now, many warriors feel an immense burden to be on their best behavior or to present their best selves, be pleasant and friendly while in excruciating pain. There was this back and forth about why we need to strive to be friendly and have pleasant attitudes, and even the common suggestion that warriors go back and visit these medical professionals when we're well so that they can see us as regular people and not just patients. That's ludicrous. And it's insulting. I'm a person whether you choose to acknowledge my humanity or not, and I'm not going to go out of my way to prove it to you. This burden, this issue is one that stems directly from anti-Black racism. No one is asking cancer patients to put on a fake smile just to get treated with respect. Right? White cystic fibrosis patients aren't worried about if questioning their treatment will be read as a bad attitude, confirming the angry black woman stereotype that's already held against them. People with other chronic illnesses are generally not dealing with these issues. This is why the fight to remove the label black disease from sickle cell is such a problem for me. When I hear folks who are super adamant about letting others know sickle cell is not a black disease, I ask why this particular message is important to them. Because we want everyone to be tested early or something to that effect is not usually an answer. The answer usually has something to do with the desire to distance the illness from blackness. As if to say, please care, take us seriously. It affects white people too, sometimes, every now and then. So is sickle cell a black disease? That's akin to asking, is race real? Yes and no. There are politics and social constructs that play all the time, which is why even when I say technically no, I still call it a black disease. It's my way of saying, let's not forget. Let's keep at the forefront what's really important here. Poor treatment, mistreatment, stereotypes, lack of funding, lack of knowledge, clinics closing, resources being pulled. All of this is tied to race and by proxy class in America. When we don't talk about that, when we try to erase the color, when people want to say technically it's not a black disorder, they are attempting to mask the anti-blackness that's at the heart of all of these problems. Right? It's like people claiming to be colorblind and not see race. Like, that's cute, but that's not how this works. Sickle cell does not just affect black people. 50% of the global cases are in India. However, here in the States, sickle cell disease overwhelmingly and disproportionately affects black folks. 1 in 500 of us. And that fact is at the core of why this illness is in the state it's in. In the same way that a lot of white folks in America are clueless about how blacks are treated, many white sickle cell warriors, even globally, are just as clueless about how sickle cell warriors of color, particularly black sickle cell warriors, are treated here. We can't have conversations about sickle cell in America without talking about race. Questions like this always give me pause because sickle cell is my normal. I don't know life without sickle cell, and after enough reflection, if I'm honest, I don't need to. When someone first asked how sickle cell disease affected my mental and emotional health, I was confused. It was like he asked how being black affected my mental health. Both are valid questions, and I was still stumped. I mean, it doesn't. Like, that's what I was saying, right? And he was a bit shocked by the answer. In retrospect, I can understand why. Sickle cell absolutely affects my mental and emotional health, as well as my relationship to my physical body. And so in turn, my self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence. In essence, it has shaped my sense of self. Now, it seems silly to have ever thought otherwise. This is why holistic health and caring about the entire self, not just in pieces, is so vital. Some of us grow up hiding our sickle cell, living double lives until we're forced to or willingly step out of the proverbial chronic illness closet and then through the extra security gate that is sickle cell. And I totally get why some of us choose that option. Still, for me, it's sometimes difficult to relate to. As a kid, I didn't realize that this thing I was proud of was something I was supposed to feel bad about. I didn't know that until people started questioning my self-assuredness. This is why it bothers me when we sit in awe of children's self-love or self-confidence or question it. We're sending the message that it's misapplied or that there's something about them that doesn't warrant that level of self-love or confidence. It was adults' constant awe of my normal that made me start to question my own sense of self. Before then, it was like, you have this thing that makes you different. And the fact that you're who you are, even with this thing that's trying to kill you every day, is more than kind of a miracle. You're like a superhero with your own personal villain to defeat daily. And I'm not just talking about the actual illness. And every day that you're alive, you win. How could I be ashamed of this? Call it naivete. I just never realized until I was older that sickle cell was supposed to be holding me back. I think that has everything to do with moms and how she approached everything from day one. It's the same thing when I look at people of color. The work twice as hard for half as much rule is so real. When you see a person of color in a place of power or success, that they had to jump many more hurdles and overcome far more obstacles than their white counterparts. And that is what I stand in awe of and inspired by. That's why I don't hide my identity as a sickle cell warrior. And the fact that those hurdles and obstacles even exist is why I can't afford to. At the beginning of my sophomore year of college, I had emergency surgery to have my gallbladder removed, like many sickle cell warriors. The surgery left me with 4 scars across my abdomen that turned into keloids. They're huge, they're painful, they suck, and I love them. They're my battle wounds. I didn't always. I had to start being intentional about loving this new part of my body. I kept them uncovered whenever possible, forced myself to see them more often. I didn't hide them from other people, which forced me to explain their origins every time someone was bold enough to ask. And this led to me being nearly naked a lot more often, which in turn forced me to let go of a lot of socially imposed hang-ups I was holding on to about my own body. Now, I rarely have on clothes at home. The process of learning to love my new battle scars was quick because they were directly tied to this thing that I already loved about myself. My identity as a sickle cell warrior. The thing that makes me feel like we're superheroes when I take the time to marvel at what we've overcome. When I hear us warriors exchange stories and share experiences, I often hear so much apologizing in the subtext of our words, and it chafes my spirit. That's what hiding my scars was, apologizing for them. That's what hiding our identities as warriors often is, apologizing for being different, not normal, sick, not easy to understand, or difficult to deal with while in pain. We need radical self-love in place of our apologies. Unapologeticness is a result of radical self-love. When folks compliment me in these areas, I'm quick to remind them these aren't some special traits I was born with, right? My unapologeticness, my boldness, my fight for better comes from radical self-love and the love I have for other people. It comes from loving myself and my people enough to defend our humanity and demand what we deserve, even when I'm scared, even when I'm tired, even when it hurts. I think if we all experience truly radical self-love within our sickle cell communities, it would collectively change the way we approached our fight. And our strategy could certainly use some help right now. Educate themselves on the illness, as well as race and systemic oppression. Simply understanding these things and how they fit together in the larger picture will reveal a bevy of ways you can personally become an accomplice alongside sickle cell warriors in the fight against sickle cell. From donating to a trusted organization to asking your friends and family members if they've ever heard of it, and starting a conversation about why this issue is important to you. That's always one of the best first steps. Start with your family and friends, people who know you and care about the things you care about.